Imagine being born so tiny that people said you could fit inside a quart mug. Imagine your father dying before you ever heard his voice. Imagine your mother abandoning you to marry a stranger. Imagine growing up with a heart so locked in pain that you couldn't speak to other children. Now imagine that same broken boy growing up to write the most important book in the history of science. Imagine him discovering the laws of motion, the secret of gravity, and an entirely new kind of mathematics, all while working alone in a dark room during a plague that killed thousands. This is not a story about a cold genius with a powdered wig. This is a story about a wounded human being who found hope not in people but in patterns. Not in love but in light. Not in comfort but in curiosity. Welcome to our channel. Today we are telling the story of Sir Isaac Newton. And by the end you will understand that sometimes the loneliest minds see the farthest. Isaac Newton was born on Christmas Day 1642 in Woolsthorpe, Lincolnshire, England. But this is not a happy Christmas story. His father, also named Isaac, was a wealthy but uneducated farmer. He died 3 months before the baby was born. When little Isaac came into the world, he was so small and weak that nobody thought he would live. 2 women were sent to fetch medicine for him. They later admitted, "We laughed and said we would not hurry. He will be dead before we return." He was not dead. His mother, Hannah Aisco, named him after his lost father. She held him tight. But when Isaac was only 3 years old, Hannah remarried a wealthy minister named Barnabas Smith. And here is the deepest wound of Newton's life. His mother left him. She moved away to live with her new husband. She left little Isaac behind with his grandmother. He was 3 years old. He never forgave her. In a private notebook that would be discovered decades later, young Newton wrote a list of his sins. One of them was threatening my father and mother Smith to burn them and the house over them. He was a child full of rage. He refused to speak to other children. He was bullied at the King's School in Grantham. One boy kicked him in the stomach. Isaac did not cry. He challenged the boy to a fight, and won. But then he demanded not revenge but respect. He made the boy rub the dirt off his shoes. This was Newton, fiercely proud, deeply wounded, and utterly alone. And yet hope found him. Not in friendship, not in family, but in a single simple object. A book. When Hannah returned to Woolsthorpe after her second husband died, she pulled Isaac out of school. She wanted him to become a farmer. She wanted him to be ordinary. Isaac was a disaster as a farmer. He let sheep wander into other fields. He forgot to close gates. He sat under trees reading while the cattle escaped. His uncle, a clergyman at Cambridge University, saw Isaac's notebooks. They were filled with drawings of windmills, water clocks, sundials, and mechanical toys that the boy had invented himself. The uncle said, "This boy is not a farmer. Send him to Cambridge." In 1661, at age 18, Isaac Newton walked 60 miles to Trinity College, Cambridge. He had no money. He had to work as a subsizar, a servant who cleaned the rooms of wealthy students and served them food. He was mocked. He was poor. He ate alone. But every night he returned to his small room and wrote in a notebook he called his questions. In that notebook he did something revolutionary. He stopped accepting what his professors told him. He wrote down everything he did not understand. He asked questions that nobody else was asking. What is light? What is motion? What holds the stars in place? That notebook was the beginning of everything. Then the world collapsed. The Great Plague of London killed over 100,000 people. Nearly a quarter of London's population. Cambridge University closed its doors. Students fled. Newton returned to the quiet safety of Woolsthorpe Manor. He was 23 years old. He had no professor, no library, no colleagues. Just a room, a candle, and his own mind. What happened next has no parallel in human history. Historians call it the Annus Mirabilis, the Year of Wonders. For 18 months, isolated from the world, Newton invented calculus, the mathematics of change, which he called flux ions. The theory of universal gravitation, the idea that the same force that makes an apple fall makes the moon orbit the earth. The foundational experiments of optics, discovering that white light is actually a rainbow of colors mixed together. All of this, in 18 months, in a small farmhouse, while the world outside was dying. The story of the apple is not a myth. Newton himself told it many times. He said, "I was sitting in the garden ruminating upon the power of gravity. It occurred to me that the same power that pulls the apple to the ground is not limited to the earth. Why not to the moon? Why not to the planets? He sat under that tree watching the fruit fall, and he realized that the entire cosmos is held together by a single, silent, mathematical law. Think about the hope in that. While the plague was tearing families apart, Newton found a universe that was not chaotic but ordered. Not cruel but logical. Not random but beautiful. He wrote in his notebook, "Nature is pleased with simplicity. Nature is not contrary to herself." Newton returned to Cambridge in 1667. He was elected a Fellow of Trinity College. He became the Lucasian Professor of Mathematics at age 26, one of the youngest in history. But he did not celebrate. He did not teach well. Students complained that he spoke to the wall instead of to them. He gave lectures to empty rooms. He published almost nothing. Why? Because Newton was terrified of criticism. His mother had abandoned him. His schoolmates had bullied him. He had learned that showing your work meant exposing your heart to attack. This fear became a poison. When a fellow scientist named Robert Hooke suggested that Newton had borrowed some ideas, Newton exploded. He withdrew from the Royal Society. He threatened to stop publishing forever. He hid his greatest discoveries in a drawer for 20 years. Here is the dark truth about genius. It often lives beside deep loneliness. Newton never married. He had no close friends. He was suspicious, secretive, and sometimes cruel. But hope does not mean being perfect. Hope means continuing to work even when you are broken. In secret, Newton kept writing. He filled hundreds of pages with calculations. He worked until his eyes bled. He forgot to eat. His assistant once found a half-eaten chicken on his desk, and a boiled egg that Newton had held in his hand for an hour, forgetting it was there. He was not happy, but he was driven. In 1684, the astronomer Edmund Halley, yes, the comet guy, visited Newton in Cambridge. Halley asked, "If the sun pulls the planets, what shape would their orbits take?" Newton immediately answered, "An ellipse." Halley gasped. "How do you know?" Newton replied, "I calculated it years ago. Let me find the papers." He couldn't find them. So he rewrote everything. From memory. In 18 months. The result was the Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, the mathematical principles of natural philosophy. It is widely considered the most important scientific book ever written. In the Principia, Newton laid out his 3 laws of motion. An object at rest stays at rest unless a force acts upon it. Force equals mass times acceleration, F equals ma. For every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. And then he wrapped those laws around gravity. He proved that the same force that holds the moon in orbit also makes the tides rise and fall. He calculated the mass of every planet. He explained why comets don't fly away forever. When the book was finally published in 1687, Newton was 45 years old. He had changed physics forever. And what did he say about himself? "If I have seen further," he wrote, "it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants." That is hope. A man who had been abandoned, bullied, and broken, acknowledging that even his genius was part of a larger human story. In his later years, Newton left Cambridge. He became warden of the Royal Mint, where he hunted counterfeiters with the same obsessive energy he had once used to crack the laws of motion. He sent dozens of men to the gallows. He was also elected president of the Royal Society. He became Sir Isaac Newton, the first scientist ever knighted. But he was still lonely. He fought with Leibniz for credit for inventing calculus, a bitter feud that lasted until Leibniz's death. He published almost nothing new. He spent his final years writing about biblical prophecies and trying to calculate the exact date of the apocalypse. He was a strange, sad, magnificent, terrifying human being. And yet, on his deathbed at age 84, he said something that reveals the hope that carried him through a lifetime of isolation. He said, "I do not know what I may appear to the world. But to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore, and diverting myself and now and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me." Isaac Newton died on March 20, 1727. He was buried in Westminster Abbey, the first scientist to receive that honor. The Latin inscription on his tomb ends with the words, "Mortals, applaud yourselves that such a great ornament of the human race has existed." But here is the hope that matters for you. Newton was not a natural genius. He was a natural loner. He failed at farming. He was terrible at friendship. He held grudges for decades. He never learned to be easy with people. And yet he unlocked the clockwork of the heavens. To our audience in the USA, the UK, and Canada, you are watching this video in a world that tells you that success comes from networking, from being liked, from smiling at parties. Newton did none of those things. He sat in a dark room during a plague and asked, why? If you feel like the outsider, if you feel like you don't fit in, if you feel like your family broke you before you even started, remember the boy who was left by his mother. Remember the servant who cleaned other students' rooms. Remember the man who fought with everyone and loved almost no one. He still changed the world. Not because he was happy, but because he never stopped looking. You don't need to be popular to be important. You don't need to be loved to be right. You just need to keep asking why. Even when nobody else is listening. If Newton's story reminded you that loneliness is not the same as weakness, hit that like button for the boy from Woolsthorpe who never stopped counting the stars. Subscribe for more stories of fragile humans who did extraordinary things. And in the comments below, what why question are you asking right now? Thank you for watching. Keep looking. The great ocean of truth is still out there. Fade to black. A single apple falls. Soft, contemplative strings. What we know is a drop. What we do not know is an ocean. Isaac Newton.